Chad, it's cyclical, right? We could feel this coming with the hires made official yesterday with Jonathan Gannon to Arizona and Shane Steichen, now the new head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. And like clockwork, Ryan Clark and others, including Bob Costas, Jake Tapper on CNN, pointing to Eric Bieniemy not being hired due to the color of his skin instead of the owner wanting to go in another direction based on priorities of said team or organization. Eric Bieniemy has quite the history if you look back through the off-the-field issues, on top of the fact that I don't hear a whole lot of his players that he's coached for or coached of on the team vouching for the guy all that much. But here are some of the media members vouching for him post-interview process, starting with Ryan Clark, who says, sounds good. Be a losing coordinator in the Super Bowl. Be a head coach in 2 days. Congrats, Gannon and Steichen. Go to 5 AFC championships, 3 Super Bowls, win 2 rings. Hope for a lateral move to prove yourself all over again. Get crapped on again, Bieniemy. Not sure what dude did, but ... alluding to he's black, so he wasn't hired. Well, Ryan Clark's smarter than just saying that 2 days after losing the Super Bowl, you're getting hired, when the hiring process has been ongoing for quite some time for both of these teams. And in all likelihood, Chad, they had their hire in mind. They were waiting on the game to end so they could actually make this official, because they couldn't prior to the game. But that didn't stop Ryan Clark or CNN with Jake Tapper and his guest Bob Costas for pointing the other direction for why Eric Bieniemy wasn't hired this go around again.
So let's just ask the question on the table. Would Eric Bieniemy be a head coach today if he
have to conclude that is likely, but I want to stipulate by saying that not every individual situation necessarily personifies a larger truth. But Eric Bieniemy, having said that, Eric Bieniemy has interviewed 15 times with 14 different teams, the Jets twice, over the last few years for a head coaching spot. Now, all 32 positions have been filled. There are 4 black head coaches in the National Football League and 2, Robert Saleh with the Jets and Ron Rivera in Washington, who are minority coaches. 4 black head coaches. In 2018, the season began with 7. So instead of continued progress, it seems like there's a lurch forward and then a fall back in this ongoing effort to reach some kind of fairness. It doesn't have to be exact equity. It doesn't have to match up to the number of black players within the league. But clearly something is wrong here systemically. Now, when it comes to Bieniemy, this is what you hear, that sure, he's a good coach, but he's the offensive coordinator under Andy Reid. Andy Reid designs the offense, and in fact, he calls the plays. Even Reid himself, who has endorsed Bieniemy as an excellent head coaching candidate, has said maybe he's got to go someplace else to be the offensive coordinator with full authority to prove himself.
And he's going to be accepting an interview in Washington to be the potential next offensive coordinator in Washington, Eric Bieniemy, to go into what Costas said there on CNN. But, Chad, this goes back to last week's discussion about not even realizing that we had 2 black quarterbacks starting in the Super Bowl. Do you really think that if a coach that's going to help a team win, based on his race, was going to keep an owner from hiring him, do you really think the owner, based on winning, would pass up that opportunity?
No, not at all. And when Ryan Clark throws out, 2 losing assistants in the Super Bowl are getting a job, while the winning offensive coordinator, the dude doesn't call plays. It's Andy Reid's offense. Right. So let's set the record straight on that. That's a big part of the reason he's not hired. And here's another reason why he just may not be hired, and has nothing to do with his race. And Bobby Barack points this out at OutKick.com in the story. February 1998, Bieniemy arrested with a teammate. They got into a bar fight. July 1990, Bieniemy pleads no contest after allegedly shoving a firefighter. September 1993, Colorado police arrested Bieniemy. The Orlando Sentinel reports that Bieniemy allegedly grabbed a female parking attendant by the neck and threatened her. That's 3. There's 3 other incidents on here in a rap sheet. Now, a lot of these things happened a long time ago when he was younger. I'm all about forgiveness and moving on. You know who else is? Andy Reid, who continues to employ the guy for years now and doesn't have a big issue with it. He is probably a changed man from those issues. But there's not a lot of NFL head coaches that can show that many incidents on their record, on their public record, that have a job as a head coach in the NFL. Now, you can point to some and say, well, there was an incident involving Mike Vrabel. We're here in Nashville, at a casino at one point. Okay, one issue at a casino where I don't even think charges were pressed or something was said or something. It's not good, and it's going to be flagged every time you're going to go for a big job interview, but it's different than the rap sheet that Eric Bieniemy has. So 2 factors here. And I think it's weird that Eric Bieniemy doesn't have a head coaching job based on his role on a Chiefs offense and all the success they've had. But 2 big factors. 1, it's Andy Reid's offense. He's not calling play. 2, the guy has a legitimate rap sheet of arrest and a record in the past that's not good. The other thing you constantly hear, Hutton, is that he's a bad interview. That one I don't buy as much. I'm sure there are plenty of head coaches in the league that have been bad interviews. I'm guessing Adam Gase was a bad interview. I don't know how Nathaniel Hackett was a great interview in the process. I doubt Jim Tom Sula, based on his opening press conference, was a great interview when he interviewed for the job. I'm pointing to 3 different white guys who were probably bad interviews that got jobs. So I think less of that with Bieniemy and think more about criminal record, not calling plays in Kansas City, working under Andy Reid as the reason. I just want to get past the assumption, like we heard there with Bob Costas, and from so many media members, let's weed out the first assumption that it's racist. Let's look at all the factors and try to figure it out. And don't just default to, well, everything's racist, and it's probably because of his race that he doesn't have a job right now. That was Bob Costas' answer.
So
that's likely was his answer to Jake Tapper, right? That's likely the case.
Right.
That if he was white, he'd have a job.
But, think about the other
I don't buy that.
The other coaches under Andy Reid, and where are they now as far as head coaches are concerned? Matt Nagy's there. He was being mentioned for either getting an offensive coordinator job or trying to get back into the head coaching circuit for interviews. Mike Kafka's another one who left last year to be the offensive coordinator, like Bieniemy's about to do, left last year to be the offensive coordinator for Brian Daboll in New York, and he got head coaching interviews this offseason based on that. He also lost out to Jonathan Gannon as a finalist in Arizona. So I don't immediately jump to that conclusion, especially given the fact that you want to talk about fair. I mean, we have seen how many interviews take place between the Colts and the Cardinals? I mean, tons. They had 3 rounds of them in Indianapolis. One of them was Bieniemy, who interviewed a couple of times. I don't look at this as, he's being passed over because we're hiring the white guy. And, especially with the Colts. Jim Irsay will be the first to point this out with who they've employed as their head coach over the years.
Oh, no, I agree.
If there's any beef to it, the fact that Jim Caldwell isn't a head coach is concerning and alarming more than it is Bieniemy based on his success record.
Yeah, I don't like the convenient argument side of it, right? I think DeMeco Ryans is going to be a great head coach, but if Ryan Clark is going to tweet that out, then Ryan Clark could say, hey, this guy didn't even make the Super Bowl as an assistant. Right. And he's young and hasn't been around that long. How is this guy getting a head coaching job?
He also lost. Yeah.
Let's compare those 2 resumes. I have one guy whose offense lit it up and dominated the second half of a Super Bowl, and he's won multiple Super Bowls. And this other young guy who didn't even make it to the Super Bowl is a defensive coordinator, and then he's in. No, he got the job because he's highly thought of across the league and because he is a defensive coordinator with an offensive-minded head coach. A lot of times that's the pairing. When you lead, you are the head coach of one side of the ball, it's quicker to get a head coaching gig. Eric Bieniemy's not the head coach of the offense. Andy Reid is. That's going to be a problem for him. That to go alongside the rap sheet. And I've got Nick in our YouTube chat firing me up saying that, where is it here? Nick says, pretty sure that Joe Mixon and Tyreek Hill have done the same or worse, but yet are still employed by the NFL teams. Nick, those 2 guys have a hard time getting a head coaching job too, based on what they've done. That's my point. They're playing, right?
Well,
there's a difference between player and head coach in the NFL and what owners are looking for with those two roles in terms of leadership.
But it goes back to my original point. They're employed by a team. They're playing for a team because they can help that team win. Period. And the owners are, if you own a team, you should hire who you think is going to be best for your organization. They should have that ability to do that. So the immediate, it's almost like writing the column, waiting on the game to end or waiting on something to happen, and then hitting post and keeping the column set aside for next year. I mean, that goes back to my original point on Aaron Rodgers a couple of weeks ago. You can just repeat the same conversation all over again, which we're going to see. But in this regard, we're seeing it every single year, and we look over the fact of the other coaches that have interviewed, the other coaches who have been hired, and the fact that in regards to the CNN clip that we listened to, if you go and watch the segment, they're not mentioning anything in regards to anything else other than race as to why he hasn't been hired. And I don't know how we decipher post-game interviews, but you have on one hand Chad Henne, who does give credit to Eric Bieniemy, and then Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, who do nothing but talk about Andy Reid. Now, I didn't watch the full post-game press conference from them, but in the immediate aftermath of that win, they're talking trash. They're saying, how dare you disrespect Kansas City, and they're giving a shout-out to Andy Reid, and that's it. For a good reason, because it's Andy Reid running the show in KC.
And wasn't it LaShawn McCoy who had on the podcast said Eric Bieniemy in this short time there didn't treat him like a human, didn't treat people like men there, and he did not like the way he talked to him and the way he acted around them. Now, look, that's one guy's opinion. I'm sure we can find a lot of players who've loved working under Eric Bieniemy also, but that's also not a great thing to hear. And here's also what I do not want, though. I do not believe that DeMeco Ryans' success or lack thereof as a head coach should deter any other owner from hiring an African-American head coach. I hate just comparing the races. So now, Josh McDaniels continues to get head coaching opportunities, and he sucks. So now the next young white guy shouldn't get a job also. Same goes for that. It's just stupid to just compare the race or the look of someone and say, well, because this guy failed, they now need to go hire the opposite race. Or because this race failed, well, that means that, there's going to be two other opportunities that are gone away because this age and race didn't work in this job. No. Go interview the candidates and hire the best possible candidates out there. Now, one thing that I will say about this, and I do think this is probably, Bob Costas talks about systemic problems or whatever it may be. I don't think a single NFL owner is not hiring a coach because of their race. But I would buy into the idea that maybe there are a lot of billionaire owners that are in their own world. And in that world may not contain a lot of minority coaching candidates, right? So who they've surrounded themselves with in the past, who they're around, there may be a little bit of a club of who you know and not necessarily what you know. The best owners know what they don't know. And oftentimes that's football, and they rely on people to give them advice on the football side of it. Maybe there's a little something to do that. But again, that's very different. And how to address that problem was the Rooney Rule, I think, in large part, to get people in a room with people that otherwise they may not have the opportunity to be in that room with. But it's very different from saying this owner's not giving someone a chance because of their race versus, well, these owners are surrounded by a certain group and now, they're not finding candidates the right way. Let's see how all this works out. But let's also just get away from, boy, this guy didn't get a job. Must be racist. Must be racist. Must be because of his race. I don't live in that America right now. And I think most of you, if you really look in the mirror and think about it, you don't live in that America also. And I just do not think there's a single owner that's sacrificing the chance to win because of some racist conceit they have.
And on behalf of not being the person that's just going to hit click on a headline and repeat this, let this be my conversation on this. Because my stance isn't going to change on it in regards to Eric Bieniemy and why or why not he's not being hired. He needs to get out from underneath Andy Reid, which he's going to have the opportunity to do in Washington if, in fact, they're going to extend the offer to him. He is accepting the offer to interview, and then we'll see what happens. But, I mean, by saying that he's being looked over based on race, I mean, he's had – how many interviews did Costas say? 14, 15 interviews?
It's a lot.
And how many minority coaches have been hired over the course of those 15 interviews? Again, it makes no sense as to why they automatically jump to that. And in regards to not being clickbait, there's where I'm coming down on it. So, Chad, have at it next time.
Well,
but again, like it's the same conversation every year with Eric Bieniemy.
Nick says this program goes out of its way to bring up hypocrisy, but yet won't call out owners for hiring players with legal issues in their past, but not coaches.
Nick also believed that they were covering up DeMar Hamlin's death.
Oh, no. Nick doesn't go that way. Nick's coming from a very different angle on that. Let me explain to Nick what I'm talking about here. If Sean McVay...
That's the same guy, right?
If Sean McVay got 2 DUIs in the next year, and he had to sit out for a year, or got banned from the NFL for 2 years, or something happened.
Yeah.
An NFL owner would probably hire Sean McVay when he was eligible again. Why? Because he's proven himself as an NFL head coach.
Mm-hmm.
So they would hire him because they know he's a great NFL head coach, and they would take the chance on that risk. Being a head coach in the NFL is a very different job description than running really fast past people like Tyreek Hill. Very different. Owners will give, I'm trying to explain this in the most common way that Nick can possibly understand it. Owners will give players a chance because they can help them win.
Right.
And they're not asking Tyreek Hill to form a game plan and to stand up in front of all 53 players and lead the group time and time again. It's about opportunity given because they help you win. If Eric Bieniemy was a head coach in the league and then had a bar fight and shoved a firefighter and did all these things that he's done in the past, and he had won a Super Bowl before as a head coach, he'd probably get another job. It's that simple. And it has nothing to do with the fact that he's black.
The
nothing.
NFL is about two things, winning and making money. And they do both very well in regards to the ratings and pouring in cash. Those are the two. These billionaire owners are billionaires for a reason. It's not because they're into losing and making poor choices. That's the common sense answer there. Now, they do make poor choices with hires. There's also reason to point to other white coaches who have been hired at a very young age that have been home runs. Sean McVay, Zach Taylor, again, all from that tree. Where's the tree from Kansas City? White or black? That's all I'm asking for head coaches under Andy Reid.
Yeah. I mean, look, Doug Peterson, someone pointed out, was an Andy Reid assistant, won a Super Bowl, got fired, got a job again.
Yeah, but won a Super Bowl after Andy Reid left. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, yes, I'm saying with the Eagles.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the lineage that we're seeing from the different coaches, that's my point. Like, I just don't see the hirings happening for head coaches from the Andy Reid tree like we do from McVay.
And that's what Paul is pointing out. Doug Peterson's the only guy who's had any success.
Right. And or like we're currently seeing from Frank Reich, believe it or not.
He's producing
OC in with the Chargers. Steichen was the coach there. Follows I mean, we've seen several different coaches, Sirianni under Reich.
And look, I'm hopeful DeMeco Ryans produces a similar lineage, right? I mean, if he goes and has success, then you may see a run on guys who work with DeMeco Ryans also.
Houston is a great example of the clickbait headline where a minority coach is fired in Houston, and it's because of his race, and then they turn around and hire another minority coach, and it's not even mentioned in the discussion of Bieniemy. 0 cents.